everybody, this is the Wikstrand. So the movie of today is of course Lara Croft Tomb Raider, the Cradle of Life. It's a really long and busy title, but we'll deal with it, I suppose. So 2 years had passed since the first movie, a movie I really dislike because it was really boring, really contrived, and it was really hokey and silly. But 2 years had passed, and you know, despite this movie having very little buzz around it, and the little buzz it had was not very impressive, but nevertheless I actually went and saw this in the movie theaters. I don't know why actually. The thing is that when the movie started and I saw the credits and it was, flowing under the water, and this was a John de Bont movie, I said to myself, oh no, they've accidentally put on Speed 2 Cruise Control. Oof, this is gonna be rough. Actually, to be fair to this movie, it is not quite as bad as John de Bont's last blockbuster fiasco, but Paramount Picture apparently saw a huge pile of money they could set fire to with this sequel. Another super flop, by the way, and probably the end of John de Bont's career as a director, and especially in the upper echelons of the Hollywood structure. And the only buzz I remember from this movie, it was what Jay Leno said, which I still think was really, really hilarious, because he said, the Lara Croft sequel is coming out in a few months, Kevin. And Kevin Eubank said, yeah, I do. And I read an article here that Angelina Jolie said that this movie is not going to focus too much on her breasts and stuff like that. Yeah, because there was a lot of guys complaining about that, about the last movie. Yeah, the movie was good, but her breast was too big. But the bust size of Lara Croft's character is not the problem with this movie. It is literally everything else about this movie that is the major problem. This is one of the single worst big budget blockbusters I've actually seen in my entire life. It is not as bad as Speed 2 Cruise Control, but oh boy, there is a lot to unpack here. So we're going to take a look at what was good. Very few things. What was bad? Most things. And why this movie is a boring, steaming pile of nothing. This is Lara Croft Tomb Raider, the Cradle of Life. So Lara Croft has found a strange yellow orb in a sunken temple in Greece. The orb is said to be some kind of a map that will show you the Cradle of Life or something like that, where also Pandora's box is supposed to be resting. Pandora's box can be used to unleash a plague on the world. And we have a bioterrorist who wants to unleash this on the world and stuff like that, so Lara Croft has to stop her. But she can't do it alone. She has to get an old flame of hers, Sheridan, played by Jared Butler, who knows some of the associates of our bioterrorist Jonathan Rice. So she springs him out of prison in Kazakhstan of all places, and so they travel to China in order to try to stop him and stuff like that. And they have some mild banters along the way, because they have history together and stuff like that. He's a former soldier who turned traitor and stuff like that. The thing is, will he end up together with Lara Croft, or does he have his own agenda, or will he be able to redeem himself for the horrible things he has done in the past and stuff like that? So there is a lot of things going on there. There's a lot of chasing around the world, the classical blockbuster stuff. The problem with this movie starts almost immediately, because in the trailers, Lara Croft and this movie didn't look too shabby actually, because edited for trailers, all the action sequences looked like they were so exciting, like so much stuff was happening, and it was going to be such an adventure popcorn movie. But when they actually had to show the actual factual action sequences in the movie, they were sluggish, they were slow, they were contrived, and they were so boring. And this can actually be applied to the rest of the movie, because this movie is so incredibly boring. And it's not just the fact that this movie is so slow moving and that things takes ages to happen, and the fact that all the characters are cliched and boring and uninteresting. It is also that we have a bunch of so incredibly boring villains. Jonathan Rice is one of the worst villains in the history of the early 2000s. He's a really uninteresting villain. I mean, Till Schwinger, who plays one of his henchmen, is much more threatening and much more interesting and much more charismatic than he is. He's just a boring dude in a suit who wants to, you know, unleash an apocalypse and stuff like that. And it's just so cliched and it is so boring. Now, I was a little bit interested when MI6 came up and, you know, tried to inject some kind of believability and realism to this movie. And I thought to myself, well, at least this movie is going to go a little bit more serious than the hokey bullshit that was the original Lara Croft movie. But it didn't work. It just made the movie look and feel dull and mundane. That is not what you want with your action-adventure movie. And the benefit sometimes of watching a movie 18 years separated from, you know, the first time I watched this movie was that some sequences that I thought looked so cool in the original looks totally dull and unimpressive now. The skydiving sequence, which I think looked total boss when I saw it the first time, now it looks boring for some reason. And the sequences that I thought was very horrible when I saw it the first time, the routine when she tries to do the A Few Good Men spot with the bayonet and the rifle thing in China, actually was a lot shorter and a lot less contrived when I rewatched it, so they kind of took out each other. There is a term that I sometimes use, but it's called script wounds. That is that sometimes you have all these -1s that happens all the time in your script, and you're constantly... That was very bad, and that was very bad. Nothing that is egregiously terrible, but stuff that is not very interesting and makes you less invested in the, you know, story that they're telling. But I always maintain that you can still come back from a situation like that. As long as you have a good finale to the whole thing, you can walk away scot-free. All the wounds have been patched up with a big band-aid. But if you fuck up the third act, if you deliver a terrible ending, you know, this entire movie is just gonna bleed out right in front of you. And that was exactly what happened in this case, because when it was 40 minutes left to this, I thought that this has been a bad movie so far, but at least it hasn't gone super stupid, and at least it has, you know, been completely nullified. And then they nullified it by delivering a single line. Nothing big, nothing major, nothing spectacular. But they made one thing clear that made me say, wait, what? And then I had to actually rewind the thing and watch it again. And I said to myself, oh no. Because that little thing, I'm not gonna say what it is, that left so many questions to me. I said, well, why didn't so-and-so happen, you know, at this point, or this point, or this point, or this point? It's stupid. It was so stupid that I totally gave up on the whole movie. I had said to myself, well, this movie is actually better than the first Lara Croft movie. It's just a little bit boring, but it's not as stupid as that movie was. And then I discovered that it was actually even more stupid than the original movie. And then there was no return. And when they ended in the most anticlimactic and boring way they could possibly have done it, I said, fuck it, this movie is actually worse than I remembered it to be. Lara Croft, The Cradle of Life is a $130 million movie that doesn't look like a $130 million movie. It looks kind of mundane. It's a bit like Speed 2 Cruise Control in that sense, that they poured so much money into this stuff and the return was not very impressive. When it comes to the characters, they are so flat and they're so uninteresting. Lara Croft has gotten a little bit more character than she had in the original movie, which is good. I think that she and Jared Butler, who plays Sheridan, actually has some pretty good chemistry together, and Jared Butler is always fun to watch, but he hadn't found his alpha male bullshit persona that he would, you know, use throughout the years yet, but he was still a kind of okay character to have in that movie. But I just didn't care at the most part. There are these early 2000 blockbusters that has really fallen from grace because they look so dated now. Maybe this is the most egregious case of all, because it was just so uninteresting, and they were able to make even sequences that on paper should be fascinating, on paper should be spectacular, to be not so spectacular. I don't know if this is John de Bond's fault, I don't know if this is Paramount Pictures' fault, I don't know if this is the writer's fault, or maybe it is the editor's fault, because this movie is also horrendously badly edited. So, you know, on top of all the horrible stuff that we already are, you know, suffering from, we also have to suffer from some awful editing and some of the worst slow motion sequences I have ever seen. It was bad. So, isn't there anything good with this movie? Not really, actually. It is a movie that tries to be entertaining but fails to do so. There are a lot of, you know, defenders of this movie saying that this is, you know, just a fun goofball action movie. But to that I said, I have seen so many better goofball action movies before this movie was made, after this movie was made, and in the year that this movie was made. This movie truly feels like an obligation rather than, you know, a director's desire to make a fascinating and interesting story. It tries to be Indiana Jones, but it completely fails at it. I really like action-adventure movies, and I was really looking forward to the first Tomb Raider movie. I wasn't looking forward as much to a Tomb Raider movie when I've seen that one, but comparing, you know, the first one to this one, the first one actually had some fun adventure atmosphere to it. This has a bored, dull tone to it that just rips away all my enjoyment of it. So of the 3 Tomb Raider movies, only the reboot is actually worth watching. The rest of it, they can suck a fat one. This is a bad adventure movie with horrible action sequences, dull performances, bad writing and horrible editing. I give this movie 14 points. It looks good in some cases, and the chemistry between Angelina Jolie and Gerard Butler is more than decent, so it has that going on for itself. But come on, this movie is so dumb, and it is so dull, and it is so incredibly boring. Which one is your favorite Tomb Raider movie? Comment below, and I'll see you next time from, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.